So, Trev, as we get into part 2 of today's show, this is going to focus more on where Notre Dame kind of needs to kind of get better. And then we talk about where this team is right now. And when I look at where this team is right now, Trev, and we talk about what are the building blocks for a championship, what are the things that we look at right now and say these are the specific areas where we think this team can be a championship football team. What are they that we know of right now? And it really begins with the combination of just everything that goes into the run game. You talk about the performance of the offensive line over most of the season in the run game has been good. Not always efficient, but explosive. And then, of course, you have the best 1-2 punch at running back in the country. I mean, that's really what it comes down to in this situation, Trevor, is when you have a 1-2 punch like this, you're just not going to you're going to be really good rushing the football. You just are. This is as dynamic of a group as you're going to find. I mean, how many teams can say, hey, we have a running back that in only 134 carries this year rushed for 949 yards and 15 touchdowns. He went for 7.1 yards per carry. And oh, by the way, he's not our most explosive back from a yards per carry standpoint. He's not our most explosive back from a 50-plus yard runs and touchdown standpoint. Think about that. That's Jadarian Price. Think about that 1-2 punch. 7.1 per carry for Jeremiah, who's really emerged as a rising star in college football, really over the second half of the season. What's wild is he had that 109-yard game against Purdue, but you get into the Navy game, you're about to get into your second bye, and he's only had one game where he had 100 yards. Well, he changed that quite a bit down the stretch, Trevor. He went for over 100 yards in 3 of the last 5 games, and if he doesn't get knocked out early in the third quarter of game 3, he has a fourth one. He had 99 yards on 13 carries and then didn't finish the game. So if he finishes that game, he's over 100 yards in 4 of the last 5 games. And so when he goes down, Jadarian Price is like, I got you. I'll go get the 100-yard game. He has his first 100-yard game of his career. And then, of course, Riley Leonard, who was one of the better running quarterbacks this season in college football, as far as like non-option type of quarterbacks, he does what he does this season. Jeremiah finishes with 949 yards. Riley finishes with 721 yards. Jadarian Price finishes at 6.51 yards. Riley Leonard was at 5.81 yards per carry. What's crazy about that is there's a lot of years where that would have been your best ball carrier of anyone that had decent number of carries. I mean, we always talk about how good Kyron Williams was in 2020 and 2021. Kyron Williams was at 4.93 yards per carry in 2021. He was at 5.3 in 2020 behind a really good offensive line. And you look at that, you think of how good Dexter Williams was at 6.3 yards per carry in 2018. And we think of the great year Josh Adams had at 6.94. He would be third in this backfield when you look at the number of carries that they have, Trev. And it just shows you how dynamic this group has been this season. And then you have your quarterback at 5.81 yards per carry, which means he got sacked at least 18 times. Right? I mean, so if you look at the season totals, that Notre Dame quarterbacks got sacked. Actually, that sack number that I put up, I think, was incorrect. No, it's 15. They ranked 20. I think the 22. They ranked 22nd. They gave up 15 sacks this year. At least 10 of those were on Riley Leonard. Right? So you take away 60, 70 yards in sacks or 50, whatever. He's now at over 6 yards a carry if you take away sacks. So when you look at this 3-man punch at running back and quarterback, I mean, you have to stop all 3 of them to stop this team, because you could shut down Jeremiah and shut down Riley, but maybe you may not be able to shut down Jadarian, or you may shut down Jadarian and Riley, but can you shut down Jeremiah? You may shut down the 2 running backs, but can you shut down Riley Leonard also? Do you have to commit so many resources to them that now they're running misdirection, read zones, and all of a sudden Riley Leonard's going out the back door? And you don't have anybody back there because you've committed so much to your rent. That's what makes this so hard, Trevor, is you have to defend 3 guys that every time they touch the ball are a threat to go 50-plus yards and score. I mean, Riley's got a lot. He had 14 touches. A lot of those are short yardage, but he's got his own fair share of big runs this season. And, that's what I think makes this team so difficult. And, oh, by the way, Aeneas Williams averages 6.7 yards per carry, and Keidron Young averages 5.5 yards per carry behind the second-team offensive line. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this as a Notre Dame fan.
No, I mean, their numbers are crazy. You go and you think about that situation that you just laid out of, you might be able to stop 4 and 24. Can you stop 13? You might be able to stop 13 and 24. Can you stop 4? And, whatever different combination you looked at. I looked directly to the Oregon-Penn State game. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton both went over for 100 yards. Imagine if Drew Aller had Riley Leonard's mobile ability, what that would have looked like, what it could have looked like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, and Drew Aller still had 5 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, so it's not like he did nothing, but, you go and you look at Jeremiah Love, and the thing that always stood out to me was the amount of touchdowns he had off of the number of carries that he had. And while you were rattling off those numbers, I did a little bit of quick math myself. Jeremiah Love scores a touchdown 11% of the time that he touches the football. So literally that means if he touches the ball 10 times, he's going to score a touchdown. That's what that is insane. I don't think enough people understand how crazy of a number that is.
It doesn't change when you include his passing. Did you include his passing statistics?
That's just rushing.
So he has 2 receiving touchdowns on 22 catches. It's literally right at your. It's right at your statistic. I mean,
that's
impressive.
I mean, you think of a guy that if he gets 10, 11 offensive touchdowns, he will score a touchdown in some capacity. And that is a lethal thing to have when you're going into the playoffs and looking to make a run.
Well, he scored a touchdown in a game. He had 6 carries. He scored a touchdown in a game. He had 9 carries. He scored a touchdown in a game. He had 7 carries. 2 touchdowns in a game. He had 7 carries.
I mean,
so yeah, I mean, he's been a dynamic back. But the thing that's been impressive about this group is they're not just home run hitters.
Right.
And I think the first half of the USC game really showed that about Jeremiah. He didn't have giant holes to run. I mean, they were good holes, right? The offensive line did a great job, but USC was committing so many resources to stop the run that he was getting through the first hole and they were getting to him and he was just running them over. And then you wonder, why do these guys keep getting leaped over? Because Jeremiah has shown if you take him on head on, he's going to run you over. Jadarian and Jeremiah can make you miss. But what I love about Jeremiah is if it's you versus him in a hole, he's not going to try to make you miss. He's going to run you over. And then when you get him in space outside, now you've got to worry about him cutting against you, jumping over you, all these other kinds. Because he's got 3 of those highlight reels. I mean, people forget he's got 3 of those. Not USC was 1. He had the one against Army, but then he also had one against Northern Illinois. Was it Northern Illinois or Miami?
Yeah, it was Northern
Illinois, right? Where he leaped over a guy in the second level.
Yep.
That's what's made Jeremiah so special the second half of the season. Is he's not just a home run hitter. He's developed patience. He makes good decisions with the football, where last year Jeremiah was just crashing into the hole as hard as he could, and he didn't show a lot of patience. This year he's really developed the mental part of the game, the feel for the game even better. And I also think being the number 1, even though he's not getting a lot of carries, he's only had 1 game all year. He went for over 15 carries or got 15 or more carries. And that was the Virginia game. He had 16. His 16 is his most. He's got 2 with 14, 1 with 12, and then the rest of his carries are 11 or fewer. He's had 3 games where he's been below 10, another game at 10. So, but knowing I'm the number 1 guy, I think he goes into the game with I don't have to go hit a home run on my first play. We saw Jadarian doing that, where it's that number 2 back mindset of, I got to do a lot more with less. And so sometimes maybe you'll make those read mistakes. And remember, Jadarian was doing that a lot early too, where he would hit those home runs, but then he'd have a couple where he kind of run in the back of somebody because he's thinking, I got to hit a home run. And over the course of the season, he's also got a little bit more patient. It's hey man, just relax, let it play out. But the wild thing is, Trev, when you look at this ground attack, Notre Dame this season has had 6-7 games of where a player has gone over 100 yards, but it's been 3 different players. So Jeremiah has 4 games of over 100 yards. He went over 100 yards against Purdue. He went over 100 yards against Navy, over 100 against Virginia, and over 100 against Army. Jadarian went over for 100 yards against USC. He also has another game with 95, another game with 86. And then Riley Leonard has 200-yard games. He went over 100 yards and just a half a football against Purdue, and then went for 143 the next week against Miami of Ohio. That goes to show that you can't just stop one of them. You have to figure out a way to stop all 3 of them. And that's where it can get difficult. And then Georgia Tech, I thought, did a pretty good job of slowing down Jeremiah and Jadarian in the run game, or at least Jeremiah anyway. Jadarian had 8 carries. So you look at that Florida State Georgia Tech game's a perfect example. They put a lot of resources on stopping Jeremiah Love and keeping him from being able to run the football. And then they put a decent amount of emphasis on Riley Leonard. Riley went 10 for 51, 2 touchdowns. It was a good day's performance, solid day's performance. Jeremiah went 14 for 36 and a touchdown, only 2.6 yards per carry. But this is, again, what makes this team so dangerous. Jadarian comes in there, has 8 carries for 69 yards. If you remember, he's the one that sparked the offense with a 20-yard run. And then, oh, by the way, in that game, Jeremiah Love had 3 catches for 57 yards. Like that's the thing is like it's so hard to stop this team because they can just kind of go off. Florida State's another example. Florida State put a lot of energy into stopping Jeremiah Love. He had 19 yards on 9 carries. Riley Leonard in that same game had 11 carries for 70 yards, 6.4 per carry. And then Jadarian Price had 95 yards on 7 carries. So, yeah, you shut down Jeremiah Love. Congrats. Riley Leonard and Jadarian Price ate you up. That's what makes this team hard to stop is because you can't just – if Jeremiah has an off day, you're good. If Jadarian has an off day, you're good. They haven't had a day yet where all 3 had an off day. And that's a big part of this, Trev, is what makes it so hard to stop so far. Now they got to continue it in the postseason, but that's been the challenge so far.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that works in their favor is they're 3 different types of runners. You know, like it would be different if Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love were similar runners. You know, you hit the nail on the head with, Jeremiah Love. Once he hits the hole, he's dragging defenders now. I mean, his first run of the game, you saw that against USC. He set the tone early and was like, hey, not one single person is going to bring me down today. But then you go and you talk about Jadarian Price, who might have the best lateral quickness on that team. I mean, it is just
I don't think it's a might.
No, yeah, like his east-west cutting ability is insane. His lateral quickness is insane. But then you go in the traits that they have where they're similar, it's why they're such big playbacks because their top-end speed is very similar. Those are fast dudes. And then, I've talked about it all season. For whatever reason, couldn't tell you why. Maybe they just underestimate how fast he is. People can just not tackle Riley Leonard. I don't know why. I'm not upset about it, but right. People can't bring him down. I don't know if it's that one dead leg cut that he has. I don't know if it's. I mean, he is 6'4", close to 220. Yeah, so he is a bigger dude, but I mean, for whatever reason, people can't bring him down. I just need him to stay on his feet and stop trying to go airborne every chance he gets.
It's so ugly. I don't get it. Yeah, I really don't get it. I really don't get it. It is kind of, I'm like, dude, you are not good at that. I don't know why you keep doing that. I really don't understand why you keep doing that.
Right.
The other thing too, Trevor, is when you look at the numbers, I wouldn't say that Notre Dame has played like a gauntlet when it comes to playing great rush defenses, but it hasn't been like when I look at some of Indiana's like rush defense, they have the number 1 rush defense in the country. We'll break this down more next week because it's not meant to necessarily compare the two right now. But when you look at sort of where they rank in the country, they have played. You and I look. They didn't play a single top 50 rushing offense this season. Correct? Isn't that what you found out? Ohio State was the best at 54th?
Ohio State was the best at 59th. They played 7 rushing offenses that ranked outside of the top 100.
Right. So that's not good. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, Trev, but I can figure that one out. That's not that good. If you look at Notre Dame, however, and you look at what they faced, no, they haven't faced I don't think a single top 25 or top 10 rush defense all season. And they've played a couple bad ones. Purdue ranks 120th. Florida State ranks 109th. But you look at the rest, Trevor, and I'm counting it up now. Army was 11th.
Yep.
And they went for, was it 2? What was their number that game? They went for
230 something.
273 against Army.
Well,
they faced number 20. So that's 2 top. They faced 49, 47, 42, 39, 30. So they faced 7 teams that finished ranked in the top 50 in rush defense this season. They went for and here's what they did against those teams: 198 against Texas A&M. Northern Illinois held them to 123. They went for 47. Miami, Ohio's 47th in rushing defense. Notre Dame went for 270 against them. Louisville ranks 42nd. They struggled in that one at 117. We talked about a lot about that one. Stanford ranked 39th in rushing defense this season. Notre Dame went for 229 in that game. Georgia Tech ranks 30th in rush defense. They went for 168 in that game. Navy's 85th. They ripped them up. Florida State's 109th. UVA's 60th. USC's 54th, and they rushed for 258. USC, I believe, was inside the top 50 before the Notre Dame game. And then when Notre Dame went for 258, as we talked about, that's the most that USC has given up on the ground, I believe, all season. No, Michigan went for 290. There's only two teams that went over 200 yards against USC. It was Notre Dame and it was Michigan. Yeah. And in the 6 games before playing Notre Dame, they gave up 111, 119, 113, 121, 56, 118.
Yeah.
So they were a much better defense than they were early. So it puts context into your where you are is pretty impressive performance, because you're doing it against teams that don't necessarily give up that kind of yardage on a regular basis. And I think that puts a little bit of a context into how good the performance was for that Notre Dame team this season. Like Miami of Ohio, 270, it's the most yards they'd given up. The next closest was 232 that Ohio U put up in the championship game. So that was 38 fewer yards. They did it on 46 carries. Notre Dame did it on 36. You know what I mean? So you just look at it, just that kind of thing. It's consistent. Just nobody else does to teams what Notre Dame has done to them for most of the season, especially the second half of the season, Trev.
Yeah, you go through and you look at some of Notre Dame's previous opponents and where they ranked going into the Notre Dame game, right? USC had the 43rd best rush defense. I look at Louisville, they had the 18th best rush defense. You look at Stanford, they had the 12th best rush defense in college football at the times that they played. Now, mind you, some of those opponents were earlier in the year, but I think it just goes to show that not only did Notre Dame perform above what they were, Notre Dame had more rushing yards in their game than what they allowed all season. Going into it, Stanford allowed 88.2 rushing yards per game before Notre Dame played them. You know what I mean? You start to look at some of those stats. I mean, Army going into their game, they had the number 3 rush defense in the country before Notre Dame played them. So that all kind of provides a little bit of context to what this rushing attack was really able to do to some of these opponents, because part of the factor of their average is what happened when they played Notre Dame. Right. So
I want to give you some context. So here's what Army did in the 4 games before Notre Dame: 61 yards allowed, 2.5 per carry; 87 yards allowed, 4.4 per carry; 117 yards allowed, 2.9 per carry; 69 yards allowed, 3.8 yards per carry. Notre Dame comes 273 yards, fought 9.4 per carry. Next 2 games against UTSA, 117 yards, 4.5 per carry. AAC championship game against Tulane, 29 yards, 115 per carry. So, listen, one of these things is not like the other, right? I mean, that Army was the one team, and again, I've said this before. And by the way, Tulane going into that game was averaging over 200 yards a game rushing going into that game. So they completely shut that Tulane run game down. They had gone over 300 yards multiple times that season, and they shut that game down, that team down on the ground. It just kind of goes to show, if you look at Army's statistics, you're like, one of these things does not look like the others. And again, it came down to that. So when you look at it, the context, you talk about building blocks for a championship, it's can you do it consistently? And that's the thing about this group, that they can do it consistently. They're doing it week after week after week after week. When 168 is your down point against the number 30 team in the country, you're going to have the results that you're going to have. And that was on the road. That was away from home. And so there is no bigger building block for a championship than this ability, because it's not just about scheme. It's not just because you have a great line. It's not because you have great backs. It's all of it. This is one of the better receiving groups in the country at downfield blocking.
Yeah.
The receivers have had a lot of struggles this year. Bo Collins has been brutal the last 5-6 games when it comes to catching the football. I hope that he would even tell you that. But you know what is not taking a back seat for Bo Collins during this stretch of tough? He's still run blocking his butt off. Jaden Thomas blocks his butt off. Jaden Greathouse has gotten a lot better as a run blocker. Jordan Faison competes his butt off as a run blocker. I mean, so there still is at least that. I think the tight ends have gotten way better run blocking. Like first half of the year, Trevor, that was a major problem.
Yep.
The run blocking, they had like one good game. I think it was against like Purdue. And then outside of that, the run blocking was mediocre at best the first 6 games of the year. They're blocking at a much higher level now. Mitchell Evans is blocking. Mitchell Evans, the last few games, probably has blocked as well as he has in 8-point time of scoring. He's never been a great run blocker.
Yep.
But he's blocking better. There's been a buy-in with, hey, when we give these 2 cats the football or when Riley takes off, you are the difference between a 30-yard gain and a 70-yard gain. I think of like the 70-yard touchdown that Jadarian Price had. And I was watching it on the Here Come the Irish episode, by the way, which was great. It is where it was Tony was the guy that does the radio, him and Ryan Harris. They were doing that play. Did you watch it? And he's like, oh, they're just going to probably run the clock out here. And then it's like Jadarian Price makes a move. Oh, he's in space. But Cooper Flanagan's blocking downfield. The receivers are blocking downfield. So when you talk about having a great rushing attack, it can't just be because you have great backs. Notre Dame had a great offensive line in 2017, but Georgia was still able to shut their run game down. Why? Because they couldn't complement it with anything else. Your backs weren't hitting holes well. They were slow to the hole. They weren't finding open cuts. There was a run in that game, for example, where Mike McGlinchey's pulling to the right, and if Josh Adams just follows him, he might go. But he got impatient, slammed it up into the B gap, and got stuffed for like a 2-yard gain. This backfield waits for that to happen and then hits it. And then there's blocking downfield. And then, of course, you have the quarterback threat. And, that's kind of where I'm at, is when you talk about the run game, and I see the comments about, we're talking about the run game right now, okay? Yes, we would like to see the receiving core be better catching the football. But when you talk about the ability to building blocks for championships, that is something they have. They have a real, legitimate, big-time run game, run talent, and run operation going into the postseason. And as you said, Trev, look at the teams that are winning in this conference championship games. By and large, most of those teams that won were teams that ran the football better. That's it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I had a coach in high school. He was my favorite coach that I'd ever had at any level, and he always used to tell the wide receiver room, "You guys are owners of the big play. Wide receivers own the big play." And when you're a young guy and you're going in there, you think, well, yeah, I mean, I could go 65 yards and burn a corner. No, downfield blocking. Wide receivers own the big play, and Notre Dame's wide receiving core takes that to heart. Very similar to what you said about Riley Leonard. Look, if you're not going to be throwing the ball a lot, you better not be turning it over. And it's kind of the same thing with the wide receivers, man. Look, if you're not going to be hauling in 11 catches a game and going over 100 yards and catching 2 touchdowns, you better be blocking your butt off down the field, and they are. I'm with you there.
When you look at the building blocks for a championship, Trev, I think there's elite talent, skill talent at Notre Dame in the backfield. The offensive line, run blocking wise, is a no question about it. They're playing right now. They're playing at a championship level right now. They got to continue that, obviously. But the other part of it is, what's the biggest stumbling block? And this is what makes the Notre Dame offense such a difficult group to evaluate, because you don't know what you're going to get from the pass game from week to week. So what's the building block for a championship? The ground attack. What's the potential stumbling block for a championship? Big picture. And the next, we'll talk about areas where they got to thrive and get better. Those will be more specific aspects. This is more big picture. But when you think about it, the biggest potential stumbling block is the pass game. And they don't need the pass game, Trev, in my opinion, for 4 games to go out there and be a lights out, rip you up type of pass game. If they needed that, this team's not going to win a championship. If it comes down to where if you can't throw the ball for 200 yards a game the next 4 games, you're not going to win a championship, Notre Dame's not going to win a championship. They don't have the pass pro ability. They don't have the receivers right now that have proven anything this season. They don't have the quarterback that's proven he can do that with any kind of consistency. There's been 2 games where Riley was on pace for about 300 yards if they would have let him keep throwing. But that was against teams that aren't very good defending the pass. This team has season high of 252 yards passing. It has certainly gotten better in the second half of the season, and I'll have some stats for that here in a second. It's certainly gotten better since the bye, but the reality is this is the group that is going to have to really this is the big question mark. What's the potential stumbling block? It's this right here. Can the quarterback and it's all, again, we just talked about the run game. All phases of the offense play a big role in this team being a big time running team. All phases play into why the passing game is a question mark. Can it be the best version of itself over these next 4 games? Because the best version of itself is enough for this team to go beat anybody they play.
Yes.
Is the median good enough? That I don't know. That's the question mark. And that's the potential stumbling block. But it's all phases. Is the quarterback going to read the defense well and get the ball where it needs to go to? Are the receivers going to catch the ball? I mean, that's kind of a big deal, right? It's kind of a big part of it. Is the O-line going to give them protection, especially against some of the teams that do a better job of rushing the quarterback? Those are the big questions that you look at and say, if they don't make it and the offense is a reason why, what do you think it'll be? It'll be because the pass game doesn't do enough to complement the run game, and that allows teams to slow the run game down without risk of being hurt by the pass game. If Notre Dame doesn't make a run, I think we're going to be able to look back to this aspect of the team and say that's probably going to be the reason why. If they go on a run where they win 4 games, then this part of the offense probably played better when it counted most. That's where I'm at with it.
There's going to come a point in the playoffs where, and I don't know if it's going to be for a whole game. It could be for a whole game. It could be for 2 games. It could be for a quarter. It could be for half a quarter. But there's going to be a time in the playoffs where the Notre Dame passing attack in all phases is going to have to play the best that they had played all season relative to what their ceiling is. I'm really glad that you brought that up because it's unrealistic. Look, guys, they're not going to go out and be 2019 LSU, right? They don't have Joe Burrow. They don't have Jamar Chase. They don't have Justin Jefferson. They don't have Terrace Marshall. You know what I mean? So they need to go be the best versions of themselves and what they're capable of doing. And there are a lot of question marks. I was feeling really, really good about where Riley Leonard was at as a passer because at the end of the day, they just need Riley Leonard to kind of go out and be similar to like a JJ McCarthy-esque. Like the reason why Michigan, one of the big reasons why is because McCarthy played a clean playoffs, right? And he just went out and was just kind of an athletic game manager. But you go back and you look at what he did against Alabama, there were moments in that game where they needed JJ to, hey, our run game got us here. Our defense got us here. We need you this play. We need you this drive. And that's going to come up. And I was feeling really good where Riley was at. There was no blatant oh my God, what is that moments? And then the interception happened against USC. However, he bounced back the next play and threw one of his best balls of the season to Mitchell Evans for a touchdown. So, it kind of cushions that blow a little bit. And you go and you look at the wide receivers. Now, I'm sure everybody knows the stats by now, but Notre Dame has yet to have any pass catcher go over 100 yards. The closest was Bo Collins against Stanford with 85. The most receptions by a Notre Dame pass catcher this year has been 5 in one game. And it's tied right now between Jeremiah Love, Bo Collins, Mitchell Evans, and Jaden Greathouse. So they need to have – and look, it's unrealistic to ask any of those guys to go from having 5 catches and 60 yards and 5 catches and 80 yards a game to 11 catches and 165 and 2 touchdowns. That's not my expectation, nor should it be theirs. But they need that group to step up, man. And then obviously the final and arguably the most important phase is going to be pass protection. You talk about the run game kind of being like a little step ladder looking thing throughout the season, is progressively getting better. I mean, the Notre Dame's pass pro has been very much looking, if I were to graph it out, kind of looks like a mountain range. It's had its peaks, it's had its valleys, and so it's all of those phases have to come together, similar to what we were talking about in the run game. And I think you said it perfectly. If Notre Dame makes a run and goes to the national championship, obviously the defense is going to play and defense is going to do what they're going to do. The run game did what they were going to do, but there's going to be moments that you go back and look throughout the playoffs and throughout the postseason where you're going to say, passing game stepped up there. That's what they needed. I agree. That's where I'm at.
So when I look at this pass game, Trevor, and you look at it's not, like you said, it's not going to be a dynamic group where they're going to go out throw for 300 yards a game. It's just not where they're going to be. It's just not going to be where they're going to be. What I'm saying is when you look at this pass attack, it has certainly gotten better. And the first 5 games, Notre Dame completed 64 points. This is as a team, not Riley Leonard, just as a team. I'll kind of crack the Riley Leonard numbers here in a second, but I just kind of wanted to go with the overall team numbers here, Trev. Is the first 5 games of the year, Notre Dame completed 64.3% of their passes. They averaged 171.6 passing yards per game. They averaged 6.1 yards per pass attempt. They averaged 9.5 yards per pass completion during the first 5 games of the year. When you look at the final 7, so coming out of the bye week, they have averaged 214 passing yards per game. That's not going to set the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination, Trevor, right? Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of those games where they weren't really throwing the ball a whole lot in the second half, but that's still 42.4 yards per game better than the first 5 games. They've upped their completion percentage by almost 3 points, 64.3 to 67.2. The yards per pass attempt has jumped up from 6.1 to 8.1 the last 7 games, and their yards per completion has jumped up from 9.5 to 12.0 in the last 7 games. So if you look at that and say, hey, that's obviously a group that's got to get a lot better. Those are not like, oh man, if you average 12 yards of completion in the postseason, boy, this team is going to beat everybody they play. No, that's not what I'm saying, because 12 yards per completion is still, if you look at it from an offensive standpoint, it's 12.0 would still rank them in the top. I don't know. Let me point this. Let me print this out. I'm going to pull it up. It's not in the top 35 for sure. It's going to be, let me see here, yards per catch. Let's see here. Let's go yards per completion, and we will go there. I swear sometimes these Google Sheets do not want to be friends with me, Trevor, and I don't know what I ever did to them to make them feel that way. Notre Dame would rank at 12.0, would rank, right now they rank 114th or in yards per completion, something like that. Right now at 12.0, if that was their entire season total, that would tie them for 64th. So it's not like wow, they've lit the world on fire in the last however long, but it's still a big improvement. Now, the thing is, if you look at those numbers, however, the yards per attempt would rank better than the yards per completion as far as a national average. So their yards per attempt during that stretch, so they've completed 125 passes for 186 attempts. That's it would be 1,498 yards divided by 186 attempts. That's 8.05. That would actually rank them 30th in the country. So it's what it is they've become a lot more efficient throwing the football.
Yep.
RPO game's better. The quick game is better. The running backs are getting more involved. They're just not an explosive pass attack. My point is, if they play like they have at their best moments in the second half of the year, that's all they need to do. They don't have to look like, oh my gosh, is this Riley Leonard or Jimmy Clausen? I can't tell. It doesn't have to be that. It just needs to be, kind of what he was in the second and third quarter against Stanford. It just needs to kind of be, what he was when you look at, the Navy game and the way he threw the ball in the Navy game. I thought he was very good. He threw for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't think he threw but 1 pass in the second half of that game. A couple passes in the second half of that game. I think he only played 1 series in the second half of that game. First half, he lit them up. You look at how he played in the second and third quarter against Georgia Tech after the interception. The Stanford game, he had 10.4 yards per attempt. Army, he was very good. He averaged 11.4 yards per attempt that game. And honestly, the USC game outside of the pick was not a bad performance throwing the football. 7.0 yards per attempt, but he was at 77.3 yards per completion percentage. That was efficient. You just got to hit a couple more of those downfield plays. And he was look, His numbers look so much different if he doesn't get drilled on that play where he's trying to hit Jaden Harrison over the middle, wide open. Right? And so that's the big part of it is Riley has to be a good decision maker, and his decision making has been very spotty. Even the second half of the year, there's some games where he is feeling it. He's reading the defense. He is going where it needs to go. And then there's games like I felt like against Virginia, at times against Florida State, where he actually did decent yardage-wise, where it's like, dude, he's missing some opportunities for big-time plays here. USC, I thought he read the defense better, just wasn't always the time to get the ball out. So he's going to have to be more on top of his game as far as getting the ball where it needs to go and protecting the football. And then, of course, the offensive line is going to have to protect him. That's good. To me, that's the biggest key. And then the second biggest key is, can the receivers catch the ball? That's kind of where it's at. They got to catch the ball. That's my big, Bo Collins, look, man, we got to roll with you. You got to catch the ball better than you have the last month of the season. They got to get Bo Collins. We'll talk about all those things, but that's the potential stumbling block, Trev, when you look at this football team in the second half in the postseason. If they don't go on a deep run, we're going to look at this group, and the numbers are going to look a lot more in the game they lose, like we saw the first 5 games, not the last 7 games.
Yeah, I agree. I look, the Riley Leonard throw that keeps me up at night, and I'm so upset that it didn't count, was that 35-yard post route that he ripped to Jaden Harrison against Virginia. I mean, that was a pretty throw, and I think it would have. I think the throw would have turned a lot of heads if that play would have counted. I mean, he still did it. But it's just, it's kind of been a season like that where it's been something good, but a read was missed. The guy was open, but he couldn't get the ball off or something. I'm with you. It's got to be complete. Got to be complete.
So, Trev, we're going to, here in a minute, we're going to go on to just sort of the areas, get into some of the nitty-gritty of how they continue thriving in certain areas and how they improve in certain areas. More specifically, we kind of looked at it from a macro level. Next, we're going to get into it a little bit more on a micro level. But before we do, folks, y'all know what to do. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your family and friends. And of course, as always, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.